Out of all the different trusted and respected personality tests out there, the Myers-Briggs has remained comfortably at the top for quite some time. The Myers-Briggs personality test can be found online, in books, and it's even administered during job interviews. And this is seemingly for good reason. The amount of people that take the test and are surprised by its accuracy and feel understood is staggering, and this is true of other big ones like the Enneagram and the Big Five assessment. People gain a sense of identity with the personality types they align with, and it probably results in them leading a fulfilled life. Some of the time anyway. But how about tests that don't assess your personality type, but rather your political views or worldly values, like the political compass or 9 axes? These serve a different purpose, obviously, and aren't as much about finding yourself as they are about finding pride in your convictions. These tests are more closely tied to morality than just personality type tests, and therefore inherently more subjective, meaning people will more passionately agree with those who get similar results and disagree with those who get different results. It's all well and good, but how about Dungeons and Dragons alignments? I know it's nowhere near as serious as the political compass, and it's not as life-changing as the MBTI, but this test I found is much deeper than you think. In Dungeons and Dragons, the commonly used alignment chart has 9 possible alignments that are determined across 2 axes. One axis is good and evil, while the other is law and chaos. A character can land anywhere on either axis, and where they fall determines how they respond to certain events in the campaign. A chaotic good character is rebellious and doesn't abide by most rules, but is still kind-hearted and has good intentions, whereas a lawful evil character might follow a personal code or even a law, but have bad intentions and care little, if at all, for the lives of other people or animals. There are also neutral characters, which may not really lean one way or the other when it comes to law and chaos or good and evil, or maybe they commit themselves philosophically to neutrality, seeing it as superior. This leads to characters that can be lawful neutral, someone who follows the rules set in place but doesn't really invest time and effort in being a good person, but they also don't have the warped mind necessarily for evil, or even a true neutral character who doesn't lean any way on any axis. This leads to 9 possible combinations, with true neutral in the middle and the extremes like lawful evil, lawful good, and chaotic good in the corners. But alignments aren't all there is to Dungeons & Dragons characters. They have a class too, and a race, but that's not really as relevant to what I'm covering in this video. Alignments might determine the morals and personal motives of a character, but classes are where their personalities shine through. There are all sorts to choose from, like the reckless and determined barbarian, or the thoughtful and wise wizard, or the charismatic and sociable bard, and so many more. I think that expressing a real human being's beliefs and personality using fantasy elements like this class system and the alignment chart is not only easy to understand, but also gives us a more fun way of gaining insight into who we are. I mean, that makes sense considering any fictional character or even any fictional system can only be created by someone who has heard of or experienced a real-world counterpart. So I think this test has a bit more merit than it might seem, and I'm not just saying that so I sound like I'm not a huge nerd talking about stuff that doesn't matter. First off, this test is 140 questions long. It's a complete beast of a survey, and the amount of analysis and processing needed to turn your answers into a result is impressive to say the least. Most of the questions go toward determining your stats, or statistics, which are quantifiable measures of a person's skill and abilities. The 6 stats that Dungeons & Dragons characters invariably have are as follows. Strength is a measure of your physical ability. An example of a feat of strength would be lifting a heavy object or climbing up a mountain without getting tired. Dexterity is a measure of your agility and quickness. This can range from performing sleight of hand tricks to dancing to dodging something thrown at you. You get the idea. Constitution is basically how good your immune system and bodily health are. A character with high constitution can eat rotten food and ingest poison, including alcohol, with little to no effect. Intelligence and wisdom are often confused, but an easy way to understand the difference is that intelligence is more of a measure of how well you can learn and analyze information, while wisdom is more about common sense and intuition. Finally, charisma is a quantification of how well you're able to socialize, like convince someone of something or befriend strangers, and it even determines how physically attractive a character is. The test asks questions that determine what your stats would be using pretty simple comparisons, like how often you exercise or how well you did in school, are pretty good ways of figuring out your strength or intelligence. These values, among a few other things, are then used to determine what class you would be. Someone with high intelligence might be a wizard, whereas someone with high charisma might be a bard, and someone with high strength might be a fighter, and so on. There's also a section that will determine your alignment, according to the 9-section chart from before, leaving you with a detailed description of both your class and alignment. The amount of effort put into this site is really impressive, and I even reached out to the creator in hopes to get an interview, but they never responded. Anyway, let's talk a bit more about the alignment section of the test. So, it might have already occurred to you that when you look at things through the axes of law and chaos and good and evil, you don't get too much variability among real human people. I mean, very few of us, if any, could actually be considered evil by Dungeons & Dragons standards. That's why Easydamus, I'll be referring to them as Easydamus, because that's what they go by on the website, presents the idea that alignments, if used in the real world for a real personality test type thing, should follow a totally different system. The main source of information they use is a concept developed by Shalom Schwartz that lays out 10 different motivations for personal actions throughout life. These are all the reasons anyone does anything, and if someone is naturally inclined to value one of these motivations over another, then they will often act in a more predictable way according to that motivation. The 10 Schwartz came up with are self-direction, stimulation, hedonism, achievement, power, security, conformity, tradition, benevolence, and universalism. Someone who values self-direction is driven by freedom, creativity, and independence. They choose their own goals, respect their own decisions, and value independent thought and action above all else. Stimulation is a motivation that leads people to lead lives where they can seek excitement and novelty. They are notably brave and are driven to seek out a varied life. Hedonism is a motivation that is characterized by seeking pleasure and sensuous gratification. All they want out of life is to enjoy it. Those who are motivated by achievement are motivated by personal success and seek to demonstrate intelligence. They are highly ambitious and want to be seen as capable by other people. Power is a motivation that makes people look for control over people or resources. This can range from being of high social status to accruing wealth in order to preserve their public image and obtain power over others. Security is nothing more than placing stability of one's friends and family and oneself above all else. They often seek to preserve social order and want to feel a sense of belonging. People who are motivated by conformity are quick to restrain their own actions and inclinations in order to keep from upsetting or harming others. They are driven by the fear of violating social norms and are highly obedient. Tradition is not too far off, but is often more associated with religion and committing to a lifestyle no matter what. Someone who is motivated by tradition is driven by respecting their own personal customs and often lead humble lives as a result. Benevolence is simply preserving and enhancing the welfare of those close to you, like friends and family. People driven by this are often helpful and honest and forgiving, but usually only for those they especially care about. Finally, universalism is a motivation that is closely tied to understanding and appreciating the welfare of all people and of nature. They heavily value equality and are driven by a need to protect the environment and are tolerant of all kinds of people. Right off the bat, Easydamus points out connections between these motivations. Like, power and achievement are very similar in that they are both driven by social standing and esteem, and benevolence and universalism share the drive to improve others' lives and overcome selfish tendencies. Once they were all connected in such a way, Easydamus came up with a circle right here, which is actually not too far off from this circle right here, which is something I made about a year ago. Anyway, in the one Easydamus produced, and mine, you can see that pieces of the wheel that are close together share values, while each one is directly opposite from one that is almost exactly opposed to it. The crazy thing, though, is that this wheel right here is directly comparable to the original 9 alignment chart from before, with true neutral being in the middle, except this one leads to alignments that actually reflect real human motivations and aren't just caricatures. Easydamus even comes up with new names for these 9 pie pieces. Righteous, which is conformity and tradition, humane, benevolence and universalism, transcendent, universalism and self-direction, autonomous is self-direction and stimulation, sybaritic is hedonism, which is the only one that has only one of Schwartz's 10 motivations, ambitious is achievement and power, ascendant is power and security, orthodox is security and conformity, and finally, the true neutral, which doesn't lean any direction or also possibly could be 2 motivations that aren't directly next to each other, is pragmatic. So what am I getting at here? Well, I just think personality tests like the Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram could use a little spice, that's all. They're accurate and they're useful, but this test right here that was developed by Easydamus is a much more fun and interesting way of looking at things. You know, I actually did make my own test to go with my wheel about a year ago, but it was nowhere near as sophisticated, and now that I've read up more on this kind of thing, I might take a stab at it again. Anyway, I would highly encourage you to go take this test yourself. I put a link in the description, it's very detailed, and there are even publicly available statistics for the results. You'll find that Wizard is the most common class, and I think it probably has something to do with the fact that most of the people who find the website on their own are probably huge nerds like me. Also, hey, another thing I wanted to mention was that personality tests like this are a good way of solidifying your sense of identity, and also are an excuse to practice self-reflection and metacognition. I would highly recommend it because everyone knows that in this day and age it's becoming more and more important to have an idea of who you are, because things like social media and the internet in general are a good way to lose your sense of self, in a bad way. Thanks for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys think of this video. It was fun to make, and I want to know, maybe some things that you might want me to cover, or which videos are your favorite. Also, I may or may not make another wheel, like the one I made before, and a quiz for it, and you'll undoubtedly never hear the end of it if I do. Everyone I knew was forced to take that first one, by me, and my subscribers are not going to be exempt of that duty. Anyway, thanks for watching for real this time. Later.